This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we are joined by the founder of Harris Football and the host of the award-winning Harris Football podcast. It's the one and only Christopher Harris. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you on here. Seriously, I've been a fan of your content for years and years. I was once upon a time one of those consumers of your content that actually thought you lived on a yacht in LA. I swear.
I am a fountain of misinformation.
It's funny to think about that because back in the day, I remember telling friends, this guy's great podcast. He lives on a yacht in LA. So funny how that works. But those unfamiliar with your work, can you introduce the little podcast that could and share what Harris Football is all about?
What it's all about is songs and me pretending to live on a yacht. I think mostly. I mean, we do a show every weekday-ish during the season, and I think the reason people listen and like the show, we'll probably talk about it, but so much of like figuring out what you want to pay attention to in sports is kind of like self-selecting, where you find the people who talk about it in a way that you respond to the most, or you think is somehow the most effective or most true for how you view it, and that that becomes your guy or your people, And I think the people who like what I do respond to the idea that football in particular isn't about numbers. It just isn't. I mean, fantasy is about numbers and wanting to predict numbers and stuff, but like, I used to cover baseball, and baseball is about numbers. Like, you can definitely have equations and formulas that will be pretty predictive, which is where the three true outcomes come from, which is where batting average on balls in play. Like, there are numbers that point to things that you can actually act on. Same kind of with the NBA. And there are lots and lots and lots of people who want it to be true about the NFL, about football. But I just don't find it to be true. And so I think the people who wind up liking what I do, they like the fact that I watch all the games, and I watch them very quickly each week, and I spend quite a lot of time on my show just kind of actually saying what I saw in games themselves, and that becoming the foundation for the belief that players who are good at football tend to be pretty good for fantasy.
I love it. And you obviously you have the almanac that comes out every summer, getting people, excited for the season and ready for their drafts. Yeah,
it's like a draft guide. I mean, I just call it the almanac because I'm just trying to think of a name for it. But I do that.
Then you also write novels, right? Can you share some of the details around some of the writing you do outside of sports?
I mean, I'm a fiction writer by trade. I have them here. Oh, I can't reach them. There's a big stack of fiction that I've written. Hooray. Yay.
That's incredible. No, it's awesome. I mean, seriously.
These days, because we're in the off season right now, we're recording mid-March. I'm not making that many shows right now. Football is kind of, free agency happening. I did a couple shows about that, but this is what I do most of the time right now is working on a new book.
Amazing. No, that's great. It's really cool that, people need, they need some diversity in what they do. So you're dedicated to the sports, but it's cool that you have something else that you really put a lot of time into. When it comes to sports, though, obviously your background, you have to have a passion for sports, doing what you do. Where did it begin? Who were your favorite teams growing up? Who were your favorite players growing up?
I mean, I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up with a fan of all the Boston sports teams. So I was and still am a fan of the Boston sports teams. I guess it doesn't feel, I don't know, when you get far enough into your life, does it, you're a sports fan, but do you still feel like you're passionate? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I'm that passionate anymore. Like, I like watching sports. I probably watch less sports in my middle age than I ever did when I was a kid. Like, I don't watch baseball at all anymore. And the Red Sox were my favorite team, bar none. That was the thing I cared about the most growing up. And they were tragic, obviously, through much of my young childhood. And and I don't watch much regular season basketball anymore. My attention span is shrinking with the times, I think. And even, you know, I cast a pretty jaded eye toward other Boston teams too. Like I don't know if I would consider myself like a truly passionate sports fan anymore.
When it comes to just like a favorite sports moment, is there something you can look back onto?
It would probably either be the Patriots in 01 or the Red Sox in 04. Those are probably tied. Like the Patriots thing was so totally unexpected. Even just the day of the game, they're a 20-point underdog or whatever they were to the Rams, and have them win that. And when they had been just the ultimate loser franchise. But I didn't cry after that one. And I did cry as a fully grown human in 04 when the Red Sox won. Like my girlfriend at the time took pictures of me weeping. So it was a lot of frustration. It was, I don't even know if it was like happy weeping. It was a lot. It was not characteristic of me as a sports fan at all. But they had just tormented us for my entire life, and the fact that it was like some part of me understood that torment had ended, and it was such a relief that I, like, for 30 seconds broke down and cried. So, I mean, is that a favorite moment? That seems like kind of a tormented moment. Maybe it's the Patriots then.
It's a memorable moment. Obviously, the curse was lifted. A lot of people shared that for sure. So when was it that you discovered fantasy sports?
It was through baseball for sure. It was, fantasy football when I was a real little kid wasn't really a thing. Baseball, it was that book. I doubt I saw the first generation of it, but at some point I saw that book, Rotisserie League Baseball, and thought it was really cool and got my friends to join a league. And it was probably high school-ish. And then I think football came along like late 90s, where it seemed like then it wasn't really big yet, but it was definitely getting more popular. And it was cool, it was a very fun way to look at it that at the time felt, like you get to do both. You get to be both obsessed with your individual, especially baseball team, because I really was very obsessed with the Red Sox. But then also maybe mitigate some of the horrible feelings of being a Red Sox fan by learning about the rest of the league and who's good and all that stuff. And as it clearly has for tens of millions of other people, it spoke to some dinosaur brain part of me, that wanted to, be good at predicting what was going to happen in sports. That's the bottom line. That's what it is.
For sure. Now, playing fantasy now or in the past, was there like a big home league that you had at one point, or now is there one league that you think's like that's your favorite league or the most important league?
So for fantasy, all I play now is football. I don't play any other sports anymore. I haven't played since the day I stopped covering fantasy baseball for ESPN. Is the day I stopped playing fantasy baseball. I'm not into it. I don't watch baseball anymore. So I am woefully ignorant. I think Shohei Ohtani is a player. That's right. That's right, America. You heard it here. I have a couple of leagues that I'm commissioner of. I would, hate to have to pick between them because, then I'll offend. But they're not. None of the people are listening, so I can tell you. I mean, so I have this league called La Liga Lebowski.
Yes.
That I talk about on my podcast a fair amount. That is a dynasty league with pretty intense rules. Have you ever looked them up? You've heard of it, obviously. Have you ever looked up the rules?
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
There are player holdouts and franchise tags and transition tags and like salary cap hits and it's quite. I mean, I'll tell you how that league how it came up if you want, but
yeah, for sure.
It has spawned like hundreds at least, if not thousands, of what they call clone leagues, clone La Ligas that people have started based on our rules, which is incredibly flattering. And we call it now. So now in my podcast ecosystem, we refer to it as Original Recipe La Liga. And the people who are in that league now consider themselves quite famous. And, who am I to...
Yeah, very complex. So, how did they begin?
So it started because I'm good friends with John Anik, who has who I knew from ESPN. We were there together for years and years and did tons of football stuff together. And he left to go do UFC, and he has subsequently become the voice of the UFC. He was not quite yet at that point, but we were such good pals, and I had been through enough people leaving ESPN. And then when you're at ESPN, you're not really allowed to do much other media. I didn't know any, once you leave ESPN, you're sort of out of the family. And so I knew if as much as we were paying lip service to the idea that we would stay in touch, that we weren't probably going to stay in touch. So I had been writing down ideas for a league, like arcane ideas for a league, for years. And I said, all right, well, this is going to be Anik is the reason. So John Anik still in original SB La Liga. And he was the reason that we actually wound up putting it together. And it's been, maybe 14 years, 15 years or something like that. And we've iterated, we've cycled through some people who couldn't quite hack the minutia and the arcaneness. But now we have a great group. It's 12 teams, and it's a tough one. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I've won 5 of the last 6 titles. Like, clearly, I would hate to have someone else have to discover that on their own.
Well, congrats, champ. I love to hear that. Who's your biggest rival in that league? Who's the one person that you gotta take out when you face him?
So, I think you want me to say Andy Behrens, because obviously Andy is horrible. And he's won that championship maybe once or something like that. It's possible twice. I can't really remember. It would be going back pretty far in time for us to find multiple championships for Behrens, right? Yeah. But like, how do you not say Cousin Josh? Like Cousin Josh, my actual cousin from my podcast, he's never won it. And just, how do you not revel in that? That's just so sweet.
And that's your actual cousin, but you do refer to a lot of people, players and whatnot, as cousins too on the show, right?
Well, usually only if their last name is Harris. Cousin Najee, that's the big one. And Josh's last name is not Harris, but he is my actual cousin.
How about settings and formats in fantasy? Let's talk a little about PPR.
Full PPR for children, you mean? Yeah, that's the running gag on my show, that full PPR is for children. It is. The best is just like the whole reason of people. It's very funny that ESPN changed to full PPR the year I left ESPN, as though I had been holding back the dam, like, just, you shall not pass. And I don't think that's true, but it's the moment when full PPR fell into vogue at this big platform is the moment that it just became a horrendous format. It's horrible because it's the moment where it became a fully passing league. Like, the whole reason PPR developed at all is because people got frustrated that they couldn't draft Priest, Holmes, or LaDainian Tomlinson, or Adrian Peterson, in the aughts. And so we need a way to make it fair, because if you're not picking 1, 2, or 3, you're just at such a disadvantage, and therefore we need to make receivers be worth more. And all we know now is that there are so many receivers and they're all worth so much. And if anything, full PPR kind of puts the lie to it and makes running backs all the more valuable, because if you find those guys who stand apart from their positional brethren, they just stand out so much more than any receivers ever do, because there's just a big, I call it the wide receiver 3 and the infinite sadness. So my recommendation to the folks out there would be, if your league plays full PPR, maybe ask them if they would like to remove the diapers.
What do you think of like the half point for like first downs, like that combination where some people are like half point PPR, half point first down?
I just don't feel like it works. Like, what's the goal behind these things? Like, we're going to give 3 points per reception to tight ends. Cool. You're just going to boost them all by the same amount.
Yeah.
And you're going to do the same thing on first downs. If anything, you're injecting more randomness, because like first downs are not really predictive of anything. You're lucky to get a first down. So like, what's your goal? Is your goal to not you, the royal you, is your goal to like level the positions? They've been leveled. They're pretty level even in standard leagues. I think they're more level in standard leagues than they are in full PPR these days. But like, half PPR gets the job a little bit. If you're looking to kind of inject noise and randomness, cool, go crazy, have all the million different crazy little formats. But it feels like the positions, if anything, have been tilted, like just numbers in general, tilted obviously more toward passing, and so I don't feel like we really need it.
It's great stance. Any other settings or formats that you do like in fantasy?
I mean, if Superflex wasn't a thing yet, really, when we started La Liga, and if I could go back from the very beginning, I would make it a Superflex, because quarterback just isn't scarce enough in a 12-team league.
Yeah.
And therefore, we're assigning dollar values based on auction values and rookie draft prices and stuff like that. And therefore, quarterbacks simply they won't go for as much money. They aren't as highly prized because the scarcity just really, really isn't there. Superflex is the way to inject scarcity. I mean, all the scoring stuff that people do, all these crazy quote unquote innovations, it's all by way of managing scarcity. And the NFL is kind of in a good place right now where you don't need to do too much scarcity managing except at quarterback. And I guess another innovation would be just get rid of tight end, fold it into receivers. Tight end isn't a real position in the NFL anymore.
Yeah.
It's just not. They're mostly slot receivers. Anyone who's actually a tight end, you don't want them. They don't produce anything. And so it really people think, oh, well, that's going to make it so that Evan Engram doesn't get, Evan Engram's a good example. He'll probably be the tight end 11 this year with the Chargers. And it's like, why do you want to own the tight end 11? He's going to get you 55 catches for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. Yippee! He should just be a slot receiver, and you should have your choice between Evan Engram and whoever. And if you want Brock Bowers, cool, but you don't have some weird prop up. And the problem with the people who are tight end advocates is that they go, Brock Bowers needs to be a first-round pick because tight end scarcity.
Yeah.
And then you actually look at the distance by which he outpaces the average tight end, and it's just so much less of a distance than the top running back would or the top wide receiver would. I think in value-based drafting terms, kind of the most kludgy, raw point differential thing, Brock Bowers would have been, even this year, great year, would have been a 5th or a 6th round pick.
Yeah.
And people are going to boost him into the first. And that's with tight end leagues counting, with tight ends counting as their own position. It doesn't reflect real football anymore because there aren't tight ends. And then also it's just not fun.
I love the stance. No, that's good. It's good. So for you, career-wise, was it something you always want to do, like sports journalism and sports media?
No.
What's your background? What led up to your 8-year run at ESPN?
I got an MFA in creative writing. So at the beginning of this, you were like, it's good to have an outlet where you can get your creativity out in the off season. And in my mind, I'm like, it's kind of the other way around. I'm a fiction writer, but you can't really make money as a fiction writer. And so therefore I do football on the side, which of course is not really true, but half the year it's kind of true. And then the other half of the year is pretty intense. But I went back to school to get an MFA in creative writing. And all I knew coming out of that was that I did not want a real job because I'd had a bunch and they weren't that awesome. And I wanted time to write fiction. I wanted to be able to be committed. And so kind of apropos of nothing, just looking for what I could get freelance writing, I started writing for a guy who had a gambling focused website that was like NASCAR. I was like, sure. Fantasy gaming. Sure. Fantasy racing. Okay. At ESPN, I was part of the original cast of NASCAR Now. It was me and I think Dale Jarrett.
Wow.
Which is pretty stupid because I didn't know that much about racing, but he was very nice. And yeah, I wound up getting hired by Yahoo, and then ESPN saw stuff that I did at Yahoo, and then I got hired away by ESPN. But it wasn't really, fantasy wasn't big yet.
Yeah.
So this is early teens, kind of, and so it hadn't really done the big explosion. It was in the process of the big explosion. But it wasn't a big plan. There wasn't a thing like there was no fantasy industry to get into, so it wasn't a matter of that. It was just like, it would be cool if I could make a few bucks, doing some freelance writing. Oh, it's about sports. Okay. I know some things about sports. The advantage that I've always had is that I'm a good writer. Like, I'm trained to be a fiction writer. I'm trained to write good sentences. So people who would see my writing would be like, this is different than most people's writing. This is good. And plus he kind of knows a few things about sports. And so, yeah, I certainly had no plan to have any of this turn out this way.
What did you gain most from your time at ESPN? And then what inspired you to go on your own and build your own brand and podcast?
Yeah, I mean, ESPN absolutely is the reason that I have any cachet in the industry, because I was part of the crew that Matthew Berry brought in to like invent fantasy as we know it in a way. Like, Matthew had the vision of like, you guys have a game, you guys have a fantasy football game, but you cut like, and Eric Carabell was already there, and he's a fantastic, good friend of mine. And like Tristan Cockcroft was already there. But I think Matthew kind of convinced everybody in upper management at ESPN that this is a very big, untapped monster that could get unleashed and make you guys a lot of money. And that's how I got hired. That's how they kind of expanded the department pretty quickly. They hired multiple editors. They relocated people into this group. And that became like the backbone of what is today still at ESPN. And like, Field is awesome and Mike Clay is awesome. And yeah. So I would say what it gave me was like everything. I think I gave it a lot too. But like, nobody would know who I was, and I would not have been able to launch my own show without ESPN and all those people there, no question. Why I left? I mean, it was time. I didn't really leave with the intention of starting my own thing. There's a kind of a weird long back scenes story about why the timing happened to be in, what was it, like July of 2015, I think. So 10 years ago almost. Which, it happened. So that's when my contract was up, because of a previous offer that I'd gotten from NFL Network. And like, it was weird. Like, my original contract time was like February, right after the Super Bowl. But because of some stuff that happened, my contract time happened to be July. And I'd always thought to myself, I kind of convinced them, somewhat against their will, to let me do a podcast once a week at ESPN, but they just didn't want to compete with the other podcast. And then it was twice a week. And then they were like, we're going to get rid of it. It was doing pretty well. Yeah. And I'd always said to myself, like, I would like to have one that was 5 days a week. That would be cool to see if I could do it. And it just was the right timing of the year. If I'd left in February, I don't know if I'd like stuck. I didn't think it was going to make any money, like, I don't know. Yeah. I would have just been like, oh, well, I guess I can't do a podcast. But because it was July, I was like, I'll give it I don't know how to make one. I don't know how to upload one. I don't know how to get ads for one. I don't know how to record guests for one. I don't know the first thing about it, but sure, I'll give it a shot. It was pretty stupid. But it was this is right before like my mom started to know what a podcast was. Podcasts were there, but like the timing was just so lucky and so unbelievable. There were like 4 podcasts about fantasy football. There just weren't any. Yeah. So it was incredibly lucky timing. And it was incredibly lucky that my contract was up in July, and it just sort of all was like the perfect harmonious come together.
I love it. I love it. What's been the most rewarding part of running the Harris Football Podcast and establishing this brand?
Oh, I mean, you know the lore of the show, the Yacht Possum stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's the community. Everybody who comes on the show is going to say the same thing. It's, wow, my listeners, what a community. It's so great.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand the level that his obsession can go to. Like, they don't understand. You listen to my show, so you understand. But like, the amount of commitment is so fulfilling. I want to do stuff for the listeners because they're so freaking committed. Like, this is
Yeah.
tens of thousands of people, and they make songs about
That's
stupid things that I
incredible.
say. Like, you've heard them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's like, if you go to harrisfootball.com, you can find an archive of 600 songs that have been played on the show that are just karaoke of a listener latching onto something stupid that I said. And trust me, it's usually really stupid. And turning it into like a karaoke song. It's amazing. Like, they're awesome. They're unbelievable. And it's not only those people who are that committed. Like, they express their talent that way. But like, I get photoshopped stuff. I get crazy emails like making fun of me. So what's most rewarding, gratifying, all that stuff is just, no one's ever had an audience like this in any way, shape. I can't imagine it. I don't know. It is obsessive, and they're really scary, but I love them.
It is true. No, it is a very unique, cult following, right? When it comes to just the dedicate, like you said, dedication. That's what I consume a lot of fantasy content. It's a big part of why I do what I do in the space is because of, I love sharing resources. And I will say, yes, indeed, the Harris Football Podcast has a unique community compared to anyone else for the most part, just because of that. Like, the songs, the dedication is off the charts.
No, they're amazing. I mean, that's it. That's the reason. I mean, I'm so grateful. It's afforded me a yacht, obviously. It's afforded me like a wonderful living, and I never would have thought I would have had this amount of just success. But that isn't when you ask the question of like what makes it, what's the most gratifying part. It's not about that. It's definitely about the people.
I love it. Now, your methodology emphasizes watching film over stats, film over over narratives. What led to you to prioritize that approach, and how do you believe that the audience gets an extra edge by listening to your content?
Of course, the answer to the last question is the only question that matters, because everything I'm going to say in response to the first part of your question is going to be self-aggrandizing BS. Am I allowed to swear on this? I don't want to swear.
Yeah, sure.
The last part, like, do people actually benefit from, because you can watch all the game film you want, and if you're not giving advice that's actionable and turns out good, then who cares? But the reason behind that methodology is when I was at ESPN, we were all kind of like both fantasy baseball and fantasy football. And the baseball part, that's like, this is the analytics revolution of baseball. That's the time when people started to understand that there were underlying numbers that were going to redefine the way you evaluated who was actually good. And also, there are very clear metrics in baseball that'll tell you who's underperforming and who's a good buy. And people are really frustrated in their top line numbers. Cool. Let's buy this guy. So my mind was very much wired to do that. I'd been doing it for several years at ESPN. And football people were talking about kind of the same way, and lots still do. And what I realized was that advice wasn't any better than any other advice. And that a lot of stats in the NFL, as much as people desperately want them to be predictive, they just aren't. They're good reflections of who was good, of what did happen. But 11 on 11 is chaos. 11 on 11 is not a repeatable phenomenon the way 600 plate appearances are, the way, whatever 400 3-point jumpers are. Is that a wrong number? Probably that's a stupid number, but whatever the number is. Because, one carry, the left tackle falls down, it's a 3-yard loss. The right defensive end falls down, it's an 80-yard touchdown, and there's no metric that can account for that variance.
Yeah.
And that gets replicated hundreds of times on every single play, let alone. So that stuff started to like crack me across the head a little bit. And then I started watching all the games. That I decided, all right, well, let's see what would happen if I just kind of watched. And I started to realize that I got insights that the box scores were just not going to give anybody else. Like, I could see who actually looked good, but for whatever reason wasn't performing well. Or I could see who kind of looked like crap, but because the offense was so overpowering or because of a lucky break or whatever, the numbers were just going to make that person look a lot better than they were. So it became my modus. It became the thing that I got known for at ESPN. I was going to, but by hook or by crook, by Monday evening, everything was going to get watched right before Monday Night Football. And it's insane to watch 16 football games from Sunday morning to, Monday night. It's crazy. And that, there are a lot of people in the industry now who even kind of like manage things by metrics. I was on JJ Zacharyson, who I love, is a good friend of mine. I was on his show and we were talking about, oh, he's the numbers guy and oh, he's the film guy. And then JJ's like, I watch every game. I just am not stupid enough to do it. He didn't say stupid, but I'm editorializing. He's too nice. He's a nice person.
Wonderful guy.
But he's like, I watch them. I just watch them by like Thursday. So I've done my math stuff. I've done the spreadsheet stuff, but I always back it up by actually watching the games. Like, are there some people who just don't watch the game? I mean, Denny Carter has the joke that he's never watched a game, but like, I'm pretty sure he has. And so like, I don't, maybe there are still some people out there who don't watch, who do this for a living, who just don't watch all the games. I think that's foolish. I think we've gotten to the point now where it's real easy to see them all eventually, and you probably should. Yeah. My craziness, and maybe part of the reason why my show is liked, is that Monday and Tuesday I've already watched them all. So before your waivers, before your trading, before your ranks come out, you're getting my opinion on who looked good, who didn't look good in every game. And people really like the Monday and Tuesday shows. But this is a long answer, and I apologize for that. The last part of your question is, of course, the only part that really matters, which is, do you think you give better advice than anyone else? And, the answer is, of course, on some players, absolutely. And then do I have a litany of people that I've missed on? Yep. And the hope is that just on balance, you wind up giving more good advice than bad, and that your wins come in high profile or high leverage enough spots that enough listeners really benefit from it. And that happens year over year. And then they just they buy in and they want to hear your next opinion.
I love it. Now, how about your process? Like, what is that film study process for you? How do you get through those games in that period of time? You put everything in your notebook?
I have like a text document on the laptop. I can't write as fast as I can type, that's for sure. But I am constantly like, I don't live tweet or skeet or anything during games, unless they're island games, because I'm behind. Because I'm pausing the stuff that's over the air, it's 10 hours of typing notes every Sunday. Sundays are really intense, and Mondays are more relaxed because you're not having to keep up with live things. You can just watch the games that happened yesterday on your own, at your own time. You got to get through them, but you can take a break. There's no real breaks on Sundays. And I like to say, I'm watching everything once, live Sunday, or just after live Sunday, and then catching up on 6 or 7 games on Monday, and then Monday Night Football. And so, can I tell you why the ball didn't find Cooper Kupp? It's hard for me. I can only watch the game as it's happening. It's not like I'm going, all right, let's rewind that. Let's watch Kupp's route here. That's for later analysis. So. Like, why didn't a receiver get the ball? Why didn't a running back get it more? All that, like some of that stuff, I'm not going to find out from a first run through. It's much more about, okay, here's the ball. Here's where the ball went. Here's who touched it, and here's how they looked in the happening. So if I need to do hey, is Marvin Harrison good? If we go through a month where the ball never, he gets 4 targets a game, which we did, I'm not going to have a great idea of why until I undertake a research project where I go back and spend an hour just watching him on games that are much older than fresh. So, I do that on my show, issues of the day, try to, go back and back up the knowledge, but I'm not, it's not like I'm inherently going to know why all 11 people on an offense did what they did in any given game just because I ran it across my eyes one time.
Well, beyond all that analysis, obviously the podcast ventures into a lot of topics outside of football, music and pop culture and movies and whatnot. How do these elements shape your content?
We have one movie podcast a year where we do our top 10 movies of the year. It's like a little bonus episode in February. I used to play more songs on the show. I don't have as much time anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't played I bet you this past football season, I bet you didn't play one song. It's too bad. Music digressions, we called them. I mean, when I started the show, I didn't know anything. Like I said, I didn't know how to make one. I didn't know how do you transition from something to something else. So I had my narrator voice record like Harris's music digression, and then I would play like part of a song and say, hey, I like this song. Don't really ever talk about movies other than that one podcast, which is a fun one that we do every year, but it's one.
Yeah.
Lot of listener songs.
Well, there's no shortage of inside jokes, though. Obviously, in unique phrases. Yeah. Obviously, I always think of crunch arguments. You mentioned the mixtapes and the theme songs. Any favorites of those you have?
Oh my God. I mean, it's to the point where there is a page that people maintain that's called the Yacht Club Dictionary that has all the stupid things. Not all, but I've said a lot of stupid things, but many of the things that I recurringly say on the show that become the vernacular. I had somebody give me a Gary Barnage. You probably can't see that. Can you see that? Gary Barnage at a listener meetup because he was good. What was the one year he was good? 2017, something like that.
Probably. Yeah.
And I think I said, so his nickname on the podcast was Mashed Potato Mountain because like I was watching Gary Barnage produce really well at tight end for the Browns, and no, I knew he was not anything special, but it just kept happening week after week. So I was like, I mean, guys, I'm the film watcher. I'm not going to tell you he's good, but feel free to ride the gravy train up Mashed Potato Mountain. Just came out of my mouth. And people latched onto it. And so his nickname on the show became Mashed Potato Mountain, which is one of about 1,000 nicknames that have been on that stupid show.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about yacht possums.
Oh, yacht possums. I thought that's what you're going to ask. Yeah, so stupid. My show is if you're looking for something that thinks it's smart and sounds like it's smart a lot of the time, and then you realize underneath, oh my God, this guy's an idiot. Definitely my show is for you. Yeah, those are two separate things. The yacht thing happened because I am bi-coastal. I grew up in Massachusetts. I have a house in Massachusetts, but I'm in Los Angeles now. And so you're talking to me from LA. But I go back and forth. And so there was some point when I first started going back and forth where someone said, I don't know where you're living out there in LA. You're obviously beyond wealthy living on your yacht, just making fun of me. And that was funny. So like I latched onto that. Yes, definitely. I live on a yacht. My name is Elmer Fudd. I own a mansion and a yacht. And the possum thing, do you want to hear the possum story?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's really stupid. So it's funny. My buddy Nick, who's in Original Recipe La Liga, he and I were just telling this story to someone else just recently, where we go to trivia a lot. We're playing trivia tomorrow night. And there was a question in trivia in 2018 that was, name the mammals with the highest occurrence of rabies in the United States by percentage or something. I don't know what it was. And we absolutely did not get it right. And we guessed possums because we didn't know. We're looking critters, right? And it turned out that was just so wrong. And possums, in fact, are like they contain antibodies for rabies or something. So whatever, I didn't know this. So the next morning, Andy Behrens, your friend and mine, Andy Behrens. People know who he is. He writes for Yahoo.
Yes.
I knew him before either of us were in this industry. We've been friends 25 years, 30 years. And he was the guest the next morning. It was a Wednesday morning or a Thursday morning or something. So I said, hey, Andy, we didn't win at trivia. I was really pissed. Do you know why? And he's like, no, that just sounds, wow. I'm so upset for you. He wasn't. And I gave him the question and he did not get it right. He guessed possums. And I said, actually, possums contain antibodies for rabies. And he launches into this thing about, I hate possums. I hate them so much. And it was making me laugh. So I said, okay, you're using all the good material before I hit record. So can you back up a second? I hit the button and said, okay, welcome Andy Behrens. Andy, why do you hate possums? And he launched into like a 3-minute thing about how much he hates possums. Well, I got to tell you, there's a pro possum lobby out there, and most of them follow me on social media, because upon hearing that, I got dozens upon dozens of people telling me that possums are actually really good, and Andy is a horrible human being for having that feeling about it. And little did we know, as you know, and current listeners know, Andy has a long list of animals he does not like. But at the time, we didn't know this. So the next day, cousin Josh is going to be on. So I go, hey, Josh, did you hear the thing with Andy and possums? He goes, no, what are you talking about? And I explained it. And he goes, I hate possums. And I go, all right, hold on. I got to hit return. I got to hit record. So I hit record again. We get the Josh hating possum story. And this now sends social media into just an absolute frenzy, being upset that so many people who are on my show are anti-possum. So obviously, to counterbalance, I adopted a possum who now currently lives with me on the yacht. And he's a Scotch drinker. He's a big Raiders fan. He wears a Josh Jacobs jersey all the time, but only a Raiders Josh Jacobs jersey. He's just a very big fan of the show, although he's never appeared on it. And so he is. This is a long way to get around to it, but he is the original yacht possum.
It's amazing.
And now people who listen to the show refer to themselves as yacht possums. Not only that, but I started a softball team here in Los Angeles. We are called the Yacht Possums.
That's right. No, that's amazing. And there's merch too, isn't there? Merch.
There is merch. I'm not wearing the hat, but there are hats. There's my graphic designer made a beautiful Yacht Possum logo. You can get stuff that just has the logo. People think you're rooting for like some obscure minor league baseball team. Yeah. So there's no shame. You don't feel like you're a nerd for wearing it.
So good. So good. Now, obviously, you mentioned Andy. Obviously, you've had a lot of great guests, a lot of recurring guests on the show over the years. How do you go about choosing your show's guests? You know, there's so many talented people in this space, and you've obviously met a lot of great people along the way. How do you assemble that roster of guests?
You know, I don't know that many people in the industry, because when you're at ESPN, you're like in a walled garden. You don't really get to do a lot of other people's shows, or you didn't when I was there. So when I left, I was like, I guess I'll just make a show on my own. And then I remember I spoke with a friend of mine, had a friend in public radio, and he was really generous with his time. And he said, you know, if you're going to make a go of this on your own, how long do you think the show's going to be? I was like, I guess an hour per episode. And he's like, woo, that's an awfully long time to be warbling by yourself. It's a pretty random, rare person who can carry a full 60-minute show by themselves. Have you thought about guests? And I was like, well, I've thought about them, but I don't really know anybody other than Behrens and a couple other people. And I don't know how to record them, and I don't know anything, but thanks for the tip. So I decided I would do, like, I never thought it was going to make any money. I just figured I would try it for the 2015 season, and then I would just go do something else. And so I couldn't bring anybody else in to do it with me, because it would mean quitting a real job and like giving up money, and that would be horrible. So I decided, all right, I'm going to do 30 minutes on my own each episode and 30 minutes with a guest. That was the original thought. Okay, I mean, I know I can get Andy, and I can get my cousin, and I can get Craig. Do you remember Craig Clark on my show? He was the original, like for the first 3 years, he was the original, like Jake Trowbridge is on now.
Yeah.
And I had Sharon Mitchell in between. So I've had 3 people do DFS picking.
Yeah.
The original was Craig, one of my oldest friends. So like, okay, I can get a few people who I already know, but I don't know anybody else. So I just started asking people who had big social media followings if they wanted to be guests. And I didn't know any of them, but they knew who I was because of ESPN. So I had a lot of different people on at the very beginning. And from that point on, it's sort of self-selected down to the people who I could talk to who wouldn't make my head explode.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, you know, from having listened to the show, I don't really play like the facilitator, the agnostic facilitator role.
Sure.
You know, I get in there, and if somebody says something and I don't agree with it, I try not to be mean, but I try to say, okay, but don't we know this? Like, I try to kind of object. Yeah. And a lot of the time I do it on the behalf of the audience, because the audience has heard me espouse a certain philosophy for a long, long time. And then when they hear someone else come on board and be like, well, I only look at the box score, I only look at yards per carry. If I don't say something, I look like a fraud. I look like I'm just going along to get along, which I don't really want to do. So there were just a lot of people who I had on that first couple of years who I was like, all right, you're nice, but I don't really think we see this stuff the same way, and it's just going to confuse the audience. And that kind of narrowed and self-selected down to a group of people who, like, I really respect all their opinions. It's a good roster of 20, 30 people.
Yeah.
And I'm adding people all the time, who I will maybe have on once, and I'm like hoping there are no landmines that they completely like. It's not like I need everybody to agree with my takes on players, but it's almost like the reasons that people like players or like situations or don't. There are just a lot of key things that you hear in very average shows that are just, I don't know. I remember, I'm not going to name names. I remember somebody coming on and we were going to talk about tight ends. And I was like, all right, if you want to talk about Kobe Fleener, that's fine. But I don't want the only reason that you like him to be Drew Brees, because everyone knows Drew Brees plays for the Saints. So I don't want that to be the first thing out of your mouth. I remember saying that to the person before we hit the button. Like, please don't let that. And so then I was like, all right, so why do you like Kobe Fleener? And they were like, well, I mean, Drew Brees is tight end. Need I say more? So that's, okay, it's true, but it's just, I've seen a lot of tight ends with Drew Brees who weren't Jimmy Graham not be good for fantasy. So yeah, do you like the player? I don't know anything about the player, that person's not for my show.
That's classic. Well, what advice do you have for young aspiring analysts? They don't have to be young, but aspiring analysts, people that want to get more involved in fantasy and get better connected in the space. Like, what advice do you have for people that want to do more in the fantasy sports industry?
I have no idea. Boy, it would be hard to start right now. It would be hard. Fair. It would be different road. It wasn't populated when I started. It was really lucky when I started. I was lucky. But I think when a market is very saturated and there's so many people who post about it and talk about it in exactly the same way, I don't know how you're ever going to get, unless you're, this sounds horrible, but unless you're unbelievably good looking and probably a lady, it's really hard to get by doing what everybody else is already doing. And there's so much received wisdom in covering any sports. There's so much. We're all now in a mature market. Somebody who was starting covering baseball in the 1960s probably had a leg up compared to covering it in the 1990s because the market wasn't as mature. So in the 90s, you really had to bring something new, and some people could and some people couldn't. And I would say, as much as probably there's a lot of schmoozing that you need to do to like just even get known at all, what's the point if you haven't already developed a way of being that isn't super, super, super common? So, I'm sorry, your analytics, like everybody else is doing your analytics, man. Like, not you personally, but the person who wants to be an analytics person in sports, like that's a mature market. And if you think you're going to really differentiate yourself doing all the, value over replacement player stuff, maybe you are, but there's a lot of people doing it. Good luck. What else can you bring that's going to give people good advice? I got to say, I think film study is still underserved. There's way fewer people doing what I do than are doing what, the pure numbers people are doing. So maybe that's a very specific piece of advice. If you can, like, I don't think I inherently just know football so well. I think I've just watched every freaking game for the last 10 years. And if you see enough, you start to notice which guys look different. It just happens. You can't help it. If you just do it, constantly do it. But, maybe without being, dictating how you differentiate yourself, I think you have to figure out a way not to be like everybody else.
It's great advice. It's great advice. Now for you, is there anybody that's like been a big impact on you during your journey in the fantasy sports industry?
I'll tell you where my head goes when you ask that question, which is probably to like Eric Karabell and Tristan Cockcroft at ESPN for having already been there, and they carried themselves like pros, like right away.
Yeah,
they treated people really well. People they didn't have to treat that well, including me probably. They just kind of like, they took it seriously. They treated people well. They acted like it was a real job and not a goof around. There are a lot of very unprofessional people who cover all sports, not just fantasy, where you'd be shocked how unprofessional they are. I saw a ton of it at ESPN. Like, that's probably just the notion that at the very beginning, the first year I was doing it, the fact that there were a couple of guys at ESPN who were like, just behave like it's a job, will you? Like, you would, if you had a job in an office, you wouldn't act like a schmuck, and people, it seems to me, treat working in sports at license to behave badly or unprofessionally, or just kind of like not respectful of people's time and not showing up when they say they're going to show up and all that stuff. Like, I probably already was like that. I had a good upbringing. Like, I think I had it, but still, it was good to see people modeling it already who already worked there.
Titans in the fantasy sports industry for sure. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to share before we close things out here?
I have no idea. No, probably not. I mean, no, I mean, it feels like you asked good questions. I don't know if I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I'm just like the person you see in front of you is the result of an unbelievable amount of good fortune. And, probably I have some talent that made people want to stick around once they heard. Certain people want to stick around. Certain people hate my show. There definitely are people who hate my approach, and they're like, I think he's so smart, thinks he's so much better. Like, well, okay, yeah, kind of. So maybe probably shouldn't listen. But like, so like, fine, there's some talent in there, but it just, man, there's so much lucky timing, and just having found the right group of people at the right time was just like, I never ever could have ever predicted it.
Well, you've done a phenomenal job, obviously, creating a great culture within that community. It's fun to witness from the outside. I wish you all the best in the future. Can you share with listeners and viewers where to find your work? You know where it is. HarrisFootball.com. There we go. HarrisFootball.com. There we go. Yep. Harris Football on Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Thrilled for you and all your success, and wish you all the best in 2025 and beyond. Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.